Let's give a warm welcome to Karen Cross.
Good evening. I have to say that coming to South Dakota and getting to go to Mount Rushmore fulfilled one of my bucket lists. It's been on my bucket list for decades. And usually I have this bucket list. Once I've done it, I check it off and I'm done. Move on, right? I have to say, your state is so beautiful and your people are so wonderful. I promise you, God willing, I will be back. So one of the things, I'm the political director for National Right to Life, but my favorite title, I just have to say, is Grandma. Anybody here, grandparents? I suspected maybe a few of you were. So that is my favorite title, and I never knew my heart could be so full of love for a little child. I had children, and I loved them dearly, but the reason we have children is for the grandchildren, okay? And then my heart was so full, I didn't believe that it could ever be more full. And then a second grandchild was born 7 months ago, and guess what? My heart grew. And the first one was the sweetest, smartest, most amazing child to walk the face of the earth. I'm sorry, I'm not biased in this in any way. And then another one came along. And he is the sweetest, smartest. Isn't it amazing how there's another one just like it? So anyway, well, you guys who are younger, you'll understand when you have grandchildren. It's amazing. So, okay, and I have to thank Dale and Jan and Dawn and Jeanette for a wonderful time last night, and Jerry for being an amazing tour guide at Mount Rushmore. He made it spectacular. Anyway, so this has been the most, hasn't it been an historic year? Unbelievable. There are people who have dedicated their lives, and I know many of you in here have dedicated your lives to the reversal of Roe. But Roe may be gone, but it's not the end. It's the beginning of a lot of work. I don't know about you, but since Dobbs, I have been busier than ever. And, a dear friend of mine, Dr. Wanda Franz, in 1973, on January 22nd, was manning a booth at West Virginia University. She had a pro-life booth there. And somebody came by and said, "You can go home, it's over. You can go home, it's over." I'm so glad we didn't go home because it wasn't over. And it's actually the beginning of a lot of hard work to protect our unborn children and their mothers at the state and federal levels through our elected officials. And that's what we're going to do. So, we save unborn babies and their mothers from abortion every time we pass pro-life legislation. Babies are saved. Just the process of passing pro-life legislation, bringing the issue to the forefront, talking about babies can feel pain, talking about their heartbeats, talking about the humanity of the unborn child, saves lives. This is why I consider politics a ministry to their unborn babies and their mothers. Unborn babies' lives are saved, and their mothers don't have to suffer the agony that abortion causes. In light of this year's Dobbs decision, I'm going to start a little with my personal story. I've had 2 abortions. I felt I had no choice. They changed my life forever, and I told myself, once I pulled myself together and accepted that I could be forgiven, which took years, I told myself that I'm going to dedicate my life to make sure that women do not have to make the tragic decisions that this 17-year-old had to make. And that's the journey that I'm on. Today, I'm the political director for National Right to Life. God certainly has shown me a new path, right? But it didn't start there. In 1984, I helped organize a pregnancy resource center. We called them crisis pregnancy centers back then, but to make sure no woman ever had to make the decisions I made. And I remember telling them at the very first meeting that I would do anything at all to help women and their babies. Just don't ask me to get involved in politics. I think God has a sense of humor, and he definitely had a different plan. So I began to meet other women who confided about me about their abortions, and they told me about the lies they were told before their abortions, like Susie, who was 16 years old and 18 weeks pregnant. Before her saline abortion, she asked them, "Is it a baby?" They told her it was tissue, like liver. But the problem is they couldn't protect her from the truth forever. And 3 months later, on the cover of Newsweek magazine, she saw a 16-week unborn child with fingers and toes and arms and legs. She was devastated. Years later, she sent away for her medical records, and contained within those medical records was a death certificate for her tiny baby daughter who was cremated. Others were told their babies were clumps of cells at 12 weeks. And even then, at 12 weeks, all of their organ systems are in place and functioning. They can suck their little thumbs and swim with a natural swimmer stroke. You know, I remember thinking, this should be illegal. They shouldn't be allowed to lie to women before this life-changing decision. So I thought, we need a law to protect women from this disinformation by the abortion industry. All I wanted to do was make sure that pregnant girls had all the facts. But there was this woman, the Senate Chair of Finance, who was dedicated to make sure they didn't have the facts. And I said to myself, you know, if we could just get rid of her, then we could pass this legislation and save lives. So we organized in her district, and lo and behold, the almighty Chair of Finance, Senator Jay Spears, lost her election. She was gone. My bill passed, and hundreds of babies are saved every single year in West Virginia because of that one simple law. That was the beginning of my commitment to politics. So, guess who signed the Women's Right to Know law that I passed? Or we, together as a community in West Virginia. None other than Joe Manchin himself. I've known Senator Manchin since he was a tall, skinny member of the House of Delegates in West Virginia in the mid-'80s. He was our go-to guy on right to life issues, and pro-abortion Democrats used to threaten him, saying that if he helped right to life with our legislation, they would pull all the legislation with his name on it, and they did. But he stood strong. After state delegate, he was a state senator. After state senator, he was the Secretary of State, and then he was governor for 8 years. And while Senator Manchin's pro-life record definitely is not perfect, he continues to stand against the abortion industry's radical agenda in the Senate. He pledged to protect the life-saving Hyde Amendment, and he was the lone Democrat to vote against the Women's Health Protection Act. We refer to it as the Abortion Without Limits Until Birth Act. And he is standing strong on the filibuster. So pray for him. Interestingly, he's not a Democratic enigma. When we look at the attitudes of abortion by political parties, we find that most Republicans, 2/3 of independents, and 45% of Democrats support limits on abortion. They don't support the abortion until birth policies of pro-abortion Senator Chuck Schumer, pro-abortion Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and almost every Democrat in Congress. This year, we're seeing encouraging signs. In June, pro-life Republican Myra Flores defeated pro-abortion Democrat Dan Sanchez in a special election in South Texas. Now, this is a heavily Latino part of Texas, South Texas, that has been dominated by Democrats for over 100 years. Her win demonstrates that Latinos are willing to leave the Democrat Party, which is especially important in places like Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada. We know, again, we know that passing pro-life laws saves lives. In fact, one simple piece of legislation, the Hyde Amendment, that limits the funding of abortion on the federal level, has saved more than 2.5 million lives. That's 2.5 million people are alive today because of that one simple, not perfect, but a simple pro-life law. With the many protective laws that you have passed here in South Dakota, you have saved countless lives. So thank you for your willingness to stand for the voiceless, our unborn children, and those who are vulnerable, and for their mothers. So here I am, decades later, as the National Right to Life Political Director, working with our state affiliates toward our single-issue, long-term goal of protecting all vulnerable lives through a three-pronged approach: education, legislation, and political action. So why have I told you all this? And what does it have to do with ministry to the unborn? We have an important job to do this year. Currently, the U.S. Senate is divided 50-50, with our pro-abortion vice president the tiebreaker. On November 8th, there are 14 Democrat and 21 Republican senators up for re-election across the nation. If Democrats increase their number of senators by one, Joe Manchin's hold on a filibuster won't matter anymore. They can change the filibuster, pack the court, pass the Women's Health Protection Act, and do all kinds of other things. For instance, make D.C. a state and add 2 more pro-abortion Democrats to the Senate roster. If they pass the Women's Health Protection Act, it would enshrine abortion in federal law, and it would tear down hundreds of pro-life protections on the state level, including parents' right to know laws, informed consent laws like the Women's Right to Know law we passed in West Virginia. Your laws would be invalidated. The abortion industry is a formidable foe against women and children. They hide behind pretty words like choice and health care, even Planned Parenthood. I like to say Planned Baronhood, because that's what they want. The abortion industry does not care about health, safety, or future. They are driven by profit. They ignore pain and suffering, abandonment, and abuse, and make billions of dollars each year in this country. Your pro-life laws are at stake, and women and babies are facing a terrible threat by the abortion industry. Again, it's amazing to think, with the many pro-life laws you have passed right here in South Dakota, the countless lives you've saved. You are a recognized leader in the fight for life. Your pain-capable Unborn Child Protection Act protected babies who can experience excruciating pain from being killed by abortion. Your dismemberment abortion ban prevents babies from being barbarically aborted by dismemberment while they're still alive. You've denied taxpayer dollars to the abortion industry, and your trigger law is finally here. You are amazing. I was going to say give yourselves a round of applause, and you did, because you guys, all of you together, made that happen. And while these successes are a result of a team effort, all of you, I'd also like to recognize the pro-life legislators. If you are a pro-life legislator who voted or co-sponsored legislation, or if you're a pro-life candidate, could you please stand? Thank you for your willingness to stand for the voiceless, our unborn children and their mothers, and for those who are vulnerable. And speaking of standing for the unborn, I'd like to recognize your pro-life U.S. Senators, John Thune. Mike Rounds isn't on the graphic because this was this year's election graphic, and he's not up this year, but John Thune and Mike Rounds. You have pro-life Congressman Dusty Johnson. You have a pro-life Governor Christine Noem. You are so blessed in this state. So I want to call your attention to a pro-abortion initiative that may be on your ballot in 2024. The South Dakota Right to Abortion Amendment. Boo, sorry. You need to do everything you can to see to it that does not make it to the ballot. And if it does, you have to defeat that measure, and it's not too early to start now. The abortion industry is going to spend tons of money to try to make your state a safe haven for abortion through birth. They will use scare tactics. The abortion industry even outright lies. You probably didn't know that, right? While passing I helped pass a constitutional amendment in West Virginia, and while doing that, the abortion industry told people that if the amendment passed, abortion would be illegal in West Virginia. They lied so well and so often that after West Virginia's Amendment 1 passed, they had to pay to put up billboards all over the state to tell people they could still get an abortion in West Virginia. Shame on them. So work hard and don't let them pass this dangerous amendment in your state. You are very blessed to have pro-life representatives governing your state and representing you in Congress. In fact, here in your state, instead of kind of hiding and being careful and about the issue, you guys kind of try to brag about who's more pro-life, right? Yep. In your state. So you have Christine Noem is the first female governor of South Dakota. She's a strong advocate for life, truly another trailblazer in this state. She signed several pro-life bills and has taken numerous steps to protect unborn children and their mothers from abortion in South Dakota. She signed legislation giving women the option to view a sonogram and hear the heartbeat of her unborn child. There are mothers across this country that credit that their lives of their children were saved because they had the opportunity to observe the humanity of their babies on the ultrasound screen and to listen to their little beating hearts. She signed the Born Alive Act that requires a baby born alive during an abortion be afforded the same degree of care of care that would apply to any other child delivered at the same gestational age. And unbelievably, we cannot pass the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act on the federal level because Democrats in Congress vote against it. How on earth you can say to this little baby, this little girl, because you survived your abortion, but you were aborted, we're not going to care for you, but we will the same baby over here, same gestational age. And then we have John Thune. Senator John Thune has demonstrated dedicated and effective pro-life leadership. He has voted for pro-life protections for unborn babies, and he also voted to confirm justices to the Supreme Court who are committed to interpreting the text of the Constitution as written, which gave us Dobbs. We need strong leaders like Senator Thune in the Senate. You have Congressman Dusty Johnson, who has a 100% record, pro-life record. He consistently votes for pro-life policies to safeguard the lives of unborn babies and their mothers. He opposes using tax dollars to pay for abortion. He also voted to preserve the longstanding Hyde Amendment. Nancy Pelosi is trying, like you can't imagine, to force us taxpayers to pay for abortion on demand. And he voted for that and has also voted against the Women's Health Protection Act. Again, he has a 100% record. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the impact of the pro-life voter. You guys make a huge difference in this. In 2020, a post-election poll of voters found that the issue of abortion played a key role in the elections. And I promise you, it's going to play a key role this year. Even all the pundits agree. They usually say, oh, abortion's not going to be an issue. It's always an issue to us, correct? Always, every election year. And this year, it's most important because on the state and federal level, it's the ability of our legislators to protect these unborn now. But we found that National Right to Life and our state affiliates were key to getting out the pro-life vote for pro-life candidates. The pro-life vote was a major factor in crushing the blue wave that was supposed to happen in 2020. In high-activity states, 43% of voters said the abortion issue affected the way they voted. Of those, 27% voted for the pro-life candidate, while 16% voted for the pro-abortion candidate. That was a net soft gain of 11% advantage for the pro-life candidates. This is despite being vastly outspent by the pro-abortion organizations such as Planned Parenthood and Emily's List. And by the way, Planned Parenthood, Emily's List, and NARAL together have pledged over $150 million to be spent to try to make sure pro-abortion candidates win around the nation. But National Right to Life's, despite being vastly outspent by them, pro-life candidates won by significant margins. And I love numbers, so I could go on for a long time about that, but I'm not going to do that to you tonight because Dale won't have it. He's got this machine running so efficiently that I don't want to mess that up. So I want to close by telling you a true story about a very scared, pregnant teenager. She was a Norwegian immigrant in a strange, foreign land, Brooklyn, New York. If you've been to Brooklyn, you understand. She chose life for her baby and placed her daughter for adoption with a couple who couldn't have children, who, by the way, took her back to Norway and raised her there. The baby, Alice, was my grandmother. I am so thankful that the abortion industry wasn't there to fix her mother's problem. Because her mother chose life, my grandmother, my mom and my aunt and my uncle, my cousins, my sister and brother, my children, my grandchildren, my nieces and nephews, because she chose life, we all live. Amen. And how many times has that happened? If you look back at your history, I do genealogy, I have to tell you this thing. My other grandmother was also born. Okay, so at my great-grandmother's farmhouse in West Virginia, she had a room with certificates and pictures and all kinds of things, and her marriage certificate was up there. And I said, and I do genealogy, and even as a little girl, I was very interested, and I went in and I said, Mama, I don't understand. That can't be right, that marriage certificate, because Grandma was born 2 years before that. The table got quiet. real quiet. So I was like, ooh, At any rate, it happened a lot. There are a lot of generations of us who are here today because moms chose life, because Planned Parenthood wasn't there to fix their problems. So, in Deuteronomy, we're told, choose life then, that you and your descendants may live. Sadly, when I held my newborn grandson, the first one, for the very first time and looked into his little blue eyes, I realized how true that scripture is, because I didn't abort 2 children. I aborted generations of children. Grandchildren, I'll never hold, I'll never be able to brag to you about, because I will brag and I have pictures to show you the other guys. Tragically, since 1973, there have been more than 63 million abortions in the United States alone. We have laws in America that protect the eagle's egg, and rightly so. Those federal laws even protect the feather of a bald eagle. We have laws in America that protect sea turtle eggs, and rightly so. Those federal laws also protect the carcass of a dead sea turtle. Well, fortunately, in June, our U.S. Supreme Court justices sent the issue of abortion back to the states where you are prepared to protect your own offspring, your unborn children. You are prepared to help women and their babies. Our message, the pro-life message, we're the true feminists. We're the ones that say women are so amazing, they're so capable, that they can have children and succeed in life. Yet right now, Democrats in Congress are trying to eliminate the Life-Saving Height Amendment. They're trying to pass the Women's Health Protection Act that I've talked about before, the law that would allow abortion for any reason through birth and would use our tax dollars to pay for them. And of course, it would eliminate all the many pro-life laws that you've already passed here in South Dakota. Abortion harms women. It does not help them. On that subject, I want to remind you of this. In your zeal to protect life, please be careful of the words you choose to use. Those who've had abortions or have participated in abortion or encouraged a girlfriend to have an abortion or took their daughter to have an abortion, they need to hear words of compassion, love, and forgiveness. The well-funded abortion industry and its allies are preparing for the fight. I mentioned before, Emily's List, Planned Parenthood, and NARAL have pledged to spend $150 million in the 22 elections alone. So I'm going to ask you to join in this fight. I know most of you are already in it. If you don't want abortion through birth paid for with your tax dollars, now is the time to go all in with South Dakota Right to Life. Let's challenge the abortion industry head on. Share your time, your treasure, and your talent to protect your future, your precious descendants. Let's choose life then, that we and our descendants may live. And remember that political action, as ugly as it is actually a ministry to the unborn. Together, let's do this. We can win it. Thank you.